Today's talk is entitled Atheism, Science and the B.B.C. So before I start about the recent program, I'd like to talk a little bit about atheism and these are some of the statistics of atheism. It is quoted on the demographics of Wikipedia of atheism, which is backed up by other studies. Now, the 2010 survey published in the Encyclopedia Britannica found that non-religious made up 9.6% of the world's population, and atheists about 2%. So non-religious are people who don't, Buddhists probably would be classed as non-religious. So we have a vast majority of the world's population that believe in some type of force. Now, in science, that's strictly not the case. So a recent survey, which sort of endorses the Britannica study, is that 95% of the population of the general public believe that there's something, and 4% and 1% refused or didn't know. But when they took this poll to the scientists, they found that it was much lower figures. There were 41% who don't believe in either. What was a telling statistic from that research is that 7% refused. Now, why would 7% of scientists refuse? And it's quite simply Rupert Sheldrake in his recent book Science Set Free talked about the peer pressure and the ridicule, and how atheism was driving science, albeit in the minority. They become absolutely deranged in pushing their belief, because it is, after all, only a belief. And it is a bit like the old adage of the tail wagging the dog. I mean, how many of these 41 actually just answered, I don't believe in anything, but actually have had their own mystical, spiritual experiences in their life, but refuse them? In fact, I know of a scientist who had a near-death experience, who saw all these things and still denies the survival of the soul. All sorts of things that are classic near-death experiences. Now, whether he has to, because of his job, I found it very strange when he was talking about being out of his body and looking down, and you know what I mean. And then says the soul doesn't survive. I mean, you're given evidence that you leave your body and then deny it. But this is the kind of pressure that is on the science world by, and I must state, by 41%. It could be even less than that, because when you take the survey to the person in his scientific location, he may find himself being ridiculed. He doesn't trust the integrity of the survey not to be shared. Oh, so and so believes in a life force or something like that. So I want to now talk about these biologists who believe in this life force, vital spark, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it. And one of these scientists was the founder of evolution, or the co-founder of evolution, but I believe he was the founder of founder of the evolution theory. But it isn't what we believe is evolution today. And what we believe is evolution today is not what I don't believe Darwin or Alfred Russel Wallace believed in. What is interesting is the missing letters from Wallace to Darwin appeared, and I did a video on this, the biological universe, the secrets of the ancients, and it was about Prana and about how Wallace's letters appeared, and it paints Darwin as a plagiarist, or at least if you did the analysis of what he's saying in the letters that he sent, that actually Wallace was the founder of the evolution theory, although it isn't how we see it today. So, in a recent BBC television program, they did a two-part documentary on Wallace. They talked about his career and what he discovered. They even talked about the Wallace-Darwin theory of evolution. And that's how it started its life back in 1855 or 1858 or round about those periods. But if you go to the Natural History, or if you went to the Natural History Museum, let's say 2 years ago, as you come into the Natural History Museum, you face a flight of stairs. There's a dinosaur in the center of it, and you have a big statue of Darwin. There is absolutely, or there was, no reference to Wallace at all. In fact, you'd have to go to the basement to have a look at his collections. Wallace collected more species than anyone of his era, and that includes Darwin and any other biologists, botanists. He even sent samples and used to fund some of his research and his visits abroad with the sale of the samples to natural history museums throughout the world. And as I say, he sent samples over to Darwin. So why was this man forgotten? You begin to ask yourself, why was he forgotten? He was one of the most eminent biologists of his era, and he was known as that. So something has turned. It's a bit like sweeping the past under the carpet. Why would science do it? Well, it's that atheism that is, it's a bit like the tail wagging the dog, as I said earlier, where the atheism is now morphing and modifying the actual historical publications into something that they did not observe or see. So, why did Wallace get there first? You have to have a look at where he studied. He spent some years in the Amazon, but his main research was in the Malay archipelago, and there are 25,000 islands there, and over time he noticed that these islands, as the sea levels rose, became isolated. There was a deep water channel between the two continents of Asia and Australia, and the most changed species were in that surrounded by the deeper waters, which were isolated for longer. And so, anyone disputing that Wallace had a better data source, as I said, he spent 8 years in the field in the Malay archipelago. Darwin mostly stayed a stayed-at-home biologist apart from his Galapagos trip. And so, if you do a comparison of where you're collecting your data from, there's 18 islands in the Galapagos, 3 smaller, and there's 25,000 islands in the Malay archipelago, which will give you a better model of the modification of islands. I mean, when you're talking of 18 islands, probably geologically not split over great eras of time, the deviation of the species is going to be less. So, Wallace spent more time in the field, collected more samples, had a better place to study, and in my mind, produced a better model. The only thing that Darwin had was he socially connected. And so on most maps you will see the Wallace line. This is where the two continents meet. You have elephants, tigers, these are the Asian animals on some of these islands, and you have the marsupials like the Cuscus bear and tree climbing kangaroos. Now, kangaroos, if you have a look at the tree climbing kangaroo, is very ugly at climbing, and doesn't even strike you as a logical survival of the fittest type of idea. It just fitted into its environment. And so the program goes on to say that Darwin sent his Sarawak law, or what he wrote in Sarawak in Borneo in 1855, his paper, probably not meant for publication, and he talks, every species has come into existence. This is the name of the law, I think. Every species has come into existence coincident both in time and space with a pre-existing close allied species. So he believes that the parent of the species existed, and through time some of them died out. Not all of them, because we still have the horseshoe crab. We still have the coelacanth. We still have many prehistoric animals that are still living. He didn't go as far as to say that they were chemicals in a pond that created them, and in fact he believed quite the opposite. They existed, they were created by a creative force, and probably the reason why he was disliked by 20th century science, and why he was wiped off the face of the scientific world. We reside in our university in the Alfred Russel Wallace building, and if I asked anyone who was he, they don't know. I mean, it's majorly telling. So anyway, so he wrote that publication, journal, and Wallace, with the geologist Lyell, wrote back to him, or colluded together, and there are some correspondence to prove this, to tell him to back off, or warned him away, that this was Darwin's ground, even though that he had a place to collect data which was inferior. He warned Wallace off. So we have a social elitist in Lyell and Darwin, who are trying to control Wallace's work, Or at least tell him to back off. It's funny, really, because Alfred Russel Wallace was admirer of Darwin, but we can say that obviously, with this being a commentary of the BBC, the BBC were an admirer of Jimmy Savile, and I'm not suggesting that Darwin was that kind of person, but you never know the nature of the person. So Darwin was a bit, Wallace was a bit naive, to be honest. So in 1858, Darwin and the publication, Darwin published Wallace's work in his absence, or extracts from Wallace's work on the theory of natural selection in 1858. Now, this was without his notice, and if that happened today, there would be cries for plagiarism. If anything happened, say, with a student submitting their work, they wouldn't be offered a degree. So his Tenate essay in 1858, wrote his paper on evolution. This is Russel Wallace. He sent it to Darwin, and the essay was titled "The Tendency of Varieties to Depart from the Original Type." And again, it was to do with the islands and the separation of species. Wallace sent the Tenate essay in 1858 to Darwin, and it was titled "The Tendency of Varieties to Depart from Original Type." And again, he was talking about those things that he observed with those 25,000 islands. I'm not suggesting he visited every single one of them, but the model of where he was working, or what he could observe where he was working, was the best place in the world to view this modification. Once this landed on Darwin's doorstep, Darwin at once decided to publish his own work. Now, how much of that own work, how many letters are missing from Darwin? Many scientists, or a number of Darwinian scientists, will say that he did not plagiarize Wallace. It would be interesting to see where he got his data from. So he arranged the Tenate essay, which was an essay sent to him, not for his use, was read at the Linnean Society in 1858. So he's taken Wallace's work while he's in the jungle and read extracts of his work to a London Scientific Society. Again, Wallace seemed to be an admirer of Darwin, so it didn't really matter. So, with those letters turning up, I think the Natural History Museum are doing a patch-up job, and recently they've unveiled a picture of Alfred Russel Wallace. Now, this program was presented by a comedian. Why a comedian, not a natural historian, would produce to try and give us some information about Alfred Russel Wallace. And this comedian is an atheist, and what he suggested in the BBC program, which is an out and out lie, or you can make your own mind up, that Wallace didn't believe in a god. If we go to the Natural History Museum's website, it talks of the missing letters from Wallace being donated in 2008. So obviously now there's been some movement. These letters would be telling about what Wallace knew and when he knew it. And even on that website it states this period is important because, referring to Wallace, was searching for a scientific explanation of how new species come into existence without them being especially created by God. He's not talking about new species coming into existence. He's talking about modification of species. So even the language that they're using on their website is suggesting that Wallace didn't believe in a God or a creative force, or that's something that the 96-98% believe in. So on the BBC site, why did Charles Darwin eclipse Alfred Russel Wallace? Well, Wallace is this is on the British Brainwashing Corporation's website, and they asked the same question. Why is it that Wallace was? Well, it's pretty damn simple. It's the same reason why they used an atheist comic. Why would you use a comedian to deliver a serious topic? And why would you get an atheist to deliver a non-atheist or believed in the vital forces of creation? And Russell Wallace was a vitalist, and that is well known. And so this is an article about Bill Bailey. So they've selected, have they selected an atheist to just say, oh well, Russell Wallace was an atheist as well? We have the Natural History Museum telling us that Wallace was an atheist. And this is an article written about Bill Bailey. I went into London about him now. I went into London today to have lunch with a friend who's in the media, and on the way I read that 80% of Bill Bailey's new show is a rant against Christianity. Can't remember exactly where I read it, but it basically, oh no, I thought to myself, here we go again. There'll be more protests, Christians being persecuted and attacked. I was right, which is shameful when you see what's happening in the real world in Iraq. I go with the Marxist Terry Eagleton when he complains that the so-called new atheists have brought their atheism on the cheap, that enables others to think that their early dismissal of religion has no inherent intellectual credibility. So they talk as though that there's evidence for this atheism, when actually there isn't. It's quite the opposite, to be honest. And so we come to the purpose of the talk, which is this brainwashing and conditioning of people, and why Alfred Russel Wallace was kept in the dark rooms in the basement as an embarrassment to the natural history movement and biological atheism, because he's such an embarrassment. The founder of evolution, which is, as far as I'm concerned. And so we come to his final quote. This is taken from his publications or writings. So anyone who tells you that Alfred Wallace wasn't a believer in vital forces, a spiritual soul, or this is an extract of his writings, and it's a shame on you, Bill Bailey, that you should talk of him as a man who believed in, who was, like you, an atheist, Man consists essentially of a spiritual nature or mind, intimately associated with a spiritual body or soul. Doesn't sound much like an atheist to me. The atheists are in the minority. The atheists are deranged. And that extract is taken from the Harmony of Spiritual and Science. The paper number is S383, and it was published in 1885, well after his theory of modification of species. Science needs to wake up and tell the truth. The BBC need to stop brainwashing us. Any decent researcher would have known that you just do a Wikipedia search on vitalism and Alfred Russel Wallace, and you'll come up with tons of stuff. Vitalism being the Prana, Chi, or life force that creates life. Wallace believed in it. Even Darwin at his deathbed was pondering on whether his soul would be unified with his wife because of his religious beliefs. Maybe just a question, but it does suggest that even Darwin believed in something. It's a shame on the BBC, shame on Bill Bailey. Very poor programme. Goodbye.